listening to Wrestling Roundup on FreeFM, ArrowFM, and MPR. I'm Grady, and live on Skype we got Josh.
Hey.
We have one big news item, I guess, this week that has intertwined so many stories together, but before we get there, let's talk about a couple of the things that are, I guess, required viewing to fully understand or set the piece of where we are. So I'm going to start on SmackDown last week, and our brand new SmackDown Women's Champion, Ronda Rousey. She has her match against Raquel Rodriguez, main roster debut, and just takes her out. Easy as that.
Yeah, it was a good short match, and I hope that eventually we get a replay of this match, but maybe 15 minutes?
Maybe a little longer?
Yeah. Because I think these two really like each other and get along well, and I think they would, given the time, bring out something really, really good.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's a little weird just because we don't know exactly what they want to do with Raquel at the moment. NXT main roster, a bit of a name change, coming out, losing to Rousey. I just don't know what's in her immediate future. But she was thrown in here as, I guess, like a small little tidbit and still managed to pull off a pretty good match with Ronda. So the chemistry is definitely there, and I'm with you. I think if you'd give them the time, they'd put on a banger of a match for sure.
Yeah. I mean, not many people can say they dominated, at least for some length of time, Ronda Rousey. And Raquel did that. They definitely showcased her in this match.
It wasn't completely one-sided. It was quick, but it wasn't one-sided.
But I think also more importantly is that Ronda Rousey refuses to further the title as the women's champion, calling it twice the world championship.
Yeah, it's a statement choice, I guess, right? Like whether you want to differentiate it or not. But hey, that's up to her. She's the champ. You gonna run up and tell her she's doing it wrong? I ain't getting near that.
No, I don't want to go to the hospital like Charlotte did. Kayfabe eyes.
You can call it whatever you want, Ronda.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other piece from SmackDown still leading us into this, we got a women's tag team title match. The champions Sasha Banks and Naomi defending successfully against Natalya and Shayna Baszler. This was sort of our one storyline, I guess, we had with these women where we were building and building and building, and champs just take them out.
Yeah, of course, it kind of was expected. Banks and Naomi haven't had the titles that long, and Natalya and Shayna Baszler don't need them. And I would much rather have them maybe remove Shayna from TV for a couple months, so we forget about her, and then bring her back as the dominant Shayna from NXT.
Yeah, at this point in time, it definitely made, like at this point in the timeline, it made no sense to take the titles off them here. Sasha Banks and Naomi, as you say, newer champs, doing pretty well, featured pretty heavily. It wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to just drop them to the random pairing of Shayna Baszler and Natalya. I agree that I preferred Shayna Baszler as that NXT dominant force, and with Rousey as the champion now, I think it could make a really good pairing there. But it is what it is, right? And Natalya's been doing good stuff off on NXT at the moment with Cora Jade and Lyons and Lash Legend and all of those folks down there. So I don't know, the pairing just to me doesn't really gel as much. It does feel like they should be often doing their own separate things.
That can be said for any team in the women's division right now.
That is true. But this does pull us through into Raw this week, which does bring up the massive story, so bear with me. I'm going to try and do my best factual recap of what happened. There was a 6-pack challenge booked for the main event of Raw. It was going to be Sasha Banks versus Naomi versus Doudrop versus Nikki ASH versus Becky Lynch versus Asuka. Winner goes on to Hell in a Cell to take on Bianca Belair for her Raw Women's Championship. Prior to the show taking off, the Women's Tag Team Champions Sasha Banks and Naomi have a disagreement with creative leave the belts and leave the arena. Leads to a frantic change. We end up getting Becky Lynch versus Asuka for the number one contendership in the main event. The, I guess, rumored way forward was going to be, and this is why I say it involves all of the championships and all of the everything, was going to be Naomi versus Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks versus Ronda Rousey at Hell in a Cell. Effectively 2 singles matches for these women's tag team champions, but that is not what we're getting. Obviously, as they walked out at the start of Raw, WWE issued a statement. Whether you want to believe every single fact laid out in it, whether you want to believe statements that have been thrown around since, there's a lot going on to the situation right now, but the fact of the matter is that they have walked out and future is uncertain.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of question marks. Personally, I am very upset from the standpoint, I wanted to see Naomi versus Bianca. They're 2 extremely athletic women who could really tear the house down if given the chance. And we're not going to get to see that because of a pride thing with their titles. And there were ways that they could have still have defended them against the people they wanted to defend them against at that night too. What's to say that you don't have them defend against Doudrop and Nikki ASH immediately after their matches with the world champions?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways around it, and obviously none of us were in the room when Naomi and Sasha brought up their issues with creative and suggested alternates and things, so we don't, maybe the solution was brought up, maybe it wasn't. I don't know, it's so hazy and murky at the moment, and it feels like one of those things where you're never truly gonna figure out the exact 100% real story.
Yeah, but at the same time, this is also a 3rd strike against Sasha Banks. This is the 3rd time she's pulled this stunt. And at some point you have to say, is it the company or is it the worker?
Yeah, obviously all of our statements and our facts and our assumptions and everything are based on at the time of recording, at lunchtime on Thursday, New Zealand time. The situation could change before this airs or before you listen to this. But I think, from what I can tell, the biggest vibe around there seems to be, there's sympathy for not liking the creative and not agreeing and wanting your bout to be respected and more of that. But I think most people are settling on, regardless of that, it's still pretty unprofessional to walk out day of, hours before you're meant to go in the ring for the main event of Raw. That's whether you take the entitledness out of it or you take this and that out of it, just in any form of entertainment, any live show that is being put on, walking out 3 hours before showtime is pretty unacceptable across the board.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that that walking out was one of the biggest regrets that Stone Cold Steve Austin has in his career, was walking out on the match with Lesnar when he walked out in 2002. Because that's just because of what you just said. It was incredibly unprofessional. And that's what this was here. From what I understand, there's not that much blood or heat on Naomi, because it's more. It seems that most people see her as sticking up for her tag team partner. But there is a lot of apparently heat on Sasha Banks, largely because this is the 3rd time she's done something like that. Whether it was the tantrum, supposed tantrum she had with Bayley at WrestleMania a couple years ago, her leaving unexpectedly last year and not being gone for like 6 months or something after WrestleMania last year. Now this.
It's a tough one, right? Because there's long-term and short-term implications here as well. The short-term implications are simply, what do you do with the belts? Is this it? Are they walking out and, putting up a stand and saying, no, we're not going to compete until you respect the belts kind of thing? Or were they making a statement by walking out of Raw? Obviously, SmackDown hasn't happened yet, so we don't know if they've done anything there to try and resolve this. But at the moment, everything short-term is up in the air. Long-term, as you say, you do have to start questioning whether the professional hassle is worth the, I guess, investment when it comes to talent like this. Because I'm sure if you do release Sasha Banks, or you let her out of her contract, or whatever it may be that sends her into free agency, that it will be seconds before her phone is ringing off the hook with multiple companies wanting to step in and work with her. And so I guess you just have to weigh up those possibilities.
That's definitely true. But there's also... Sasha Banks has a bit of a Hollywood bug that she's caught.
It's true.
As well. So she may decide not to wrestle anymore and just go full-time Hollywood. Which I wouldn't blame her.
We've seen it done a few times.
Yeah. And if you've got talent, make the money where you can. And apparently, at least people think that she's been pretty good in the stuff that she's been doing. So if that's the direction she decides to go in, that's fine. I just kind of wish she would have left on better terms.
Yeah, I don't know. Now we go into like the hypothesizing piece of this, and I don't think this is the last we see of either of them in a WWE ring. I think it might be the evidence of at least a downhill slide for Sasha Banks, but I do think that they come back, whether it is to drop the titles or whether it is, they patch up their differences, etc., with the company, that is, not with themselves. I just don't feel like that was an end. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't feel like there's enough gravity to the situation necessarily for that to be, walking out and then waiting however long they want to stretch out your contract, especially with how linked Naomi is to things. And as you say, with Sasha Banks having outside wrestling possibilities on the horizons, I don't know. I just got the gut feeling that we're going to see them, and I'd say would see them, within a month kind of thing. Kind of a short term, sorted out kind of deal.
Yeah, I definitely could see them coming back in a little bit, either to lose the titles or to acknowledge that the titles have been retired or something. I don't know. This is just one really weird situation that just sprang out of nowhere during Raw. It's like, don't know what we're doing next.
Yeah, I think it was one of the actual live situations we've been able to discuss as it's happening. We posted the image of the 6-woman main event, and it was like, yeah, this could be a cool match. Interesting to see what they do here. And then boom, the first piece of news breaks, and then boom, the next rumor comes out, and then WWE issue a statement, and then that starts getting picked apart, and it's back and forth and all over the place. And as far as I'm aware, Sasha and Naomi haven't publicly commented on this just yet. So we are still waiting for at least half the story to come out. We've heard accounts of accounts of accounts, like fifth-hand stories, but the jury is still out to a point, and we're just sitting around waiting to see what's next for Sasha, what's next for Naomi, what's next for the women's tag team titles. Is this the retirement point? And we at least know what's next for the Raw Women's Champion, which is a meeting with Asuka.
Yeah,
that was an amazing segue.
Yeah, Asuka always seems to be the Rock in the rock paper scissors triumph that is Charlotte, Becky, Asuka. Asuka can't beat Charlotte. Charlotte can't beat Becky. Becky can't beat Asuka.
Yeah, it does seem like that most of the time. And yeah, it was kind of, I guess, a in case of emergency break glass situation here. We didn't necessarily need to see Becky versus Bianca again. So we go with, with the two options presented in front of us, we go with the Asuka option.
Yeah, although there's always possibility they could throw Becky in like a triple threat, because it's not a completely outlandish idea.
No, especially not if they're making it up on the fly because of the changes here. We could settle us into a nice little default like this and then shake it up and change it around as we need to in the coming weeks.
We do need to ask what's next for Ronda then, because the plan was Sasha. we have no idea what they want to do with SmackDown on the SmackDown side.
Yeah, it leaves us completely open in terms of their women's division. You know, we just moved Lacey Evans up to Raw as well, and wide open. Maybe we do get Ronda versus Shayna Baszler.
Maybe just as a throwaway match. Sure. But I don't know. It's just so many questions. We had a lot of questions, and they just threw an entire book at us of questions.
Yeah. And it's really late in the show, but I really wanted to talk about that last topic uninterrupted. So we will now be going into our entrance theme of the week. When we come back, we will only have maybe 8 minutes left of the show. But that entrance theme of the week is that of the Brood. Enjoy the Wrestling Roundup on FreeFM, ArrowFM, and MPR. I'm Grady, he's Josh, and I assume you picked the Brood's theme because Edge is forming another stable.
Sort of. It was just a random one that I thought of, but it does kind of fit in with the fact that Edge seems to be like this evil, vampire-like character like when he was in the Brood. So it works.
Yeah, let's take it. And a couple of things else to mention in the short time we have left. We seem to be, quote unquote, receiving our tag team title unification match on SmackDown, I believe, as the show airs in New Zealand, if not one day after. That is the real question. Will the titles actually be unified, or are we going to have some sort of screwy finish?
I think there's almost certainly going to be a screwy finish. I don't think the titles is going to be unified on a SmackDown. I think if they are, and I'm seriously thinking they're not, it would be done at the pay-per-view.
Yeah, I think it really would be weird. You know, we've combined the titles before, but it would just be super weird to have it done, as you say, on a random SmackDown. I don't know.
That said, if it does happen, it almost certainly has to be the Usos that win it, because that frees up Randy Orton to go after our World Heavyweight Champion.
That's true. We could possibly see that match, though, if they were still holding the titles, but then, I don't know. It's such a weird place, you know, much like we are with the women's scene at the moment, where both tag team champions were about to face both world champions. Kind of a similar thing here, right? With all the rumors being Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns, but Randy Orton's busy holding one half of a tag team title that's meant to be being unified, and there's so much going on with Hell in a Cell only so far away. June 5th, only 2 more weeks of content away from being live, and, you know, we don't necessarily know what we're doing just yet.
And I will say that during this promo at the end of SmackDown last week, there was definitely a star-making moment when Riddle out of nowhere just rocks Roman Reigns. You don't see it coming, and I know I popped when I saw it. Because Riddle has... we questioned whether or not he could make it to the top a couple years ago, just because of his personality.
Yeah.
He has become so legitimized just from this tag team with Randy Orton. I really do think we could see him as a world champion in the next year or so, especially if they decide to split the titles back up.
It's a lot harder to think about, you know, when we don't have the titles split up and we got just this one big champion. Just because it's kind of hard to think of anybody dethroning Roman Reigns from that one big role right now, and it's hard because, you know, we got Hell in a Cell coming up, then we have Money in the Bank, then we have SummerSlam, and then we have Clash at the Castle, where it's 99% sure that it's going to be a Drew McIntyre defense there. And if he's going to be defending the title, then that's 3 more times he's still got to defend it before we get there against 3 different opponents. I guess it does also raise the question of, if the titles are truly unified and the Money in the Bank briefcase does get cashed in, do you get both titles?
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of questions that are left remained. It's also possible that you may decide when you cash in that you only want to take half the title. Why you would do that, I don't know, but that's always a possibility. WWE has done random things before and things out of nowhere, so having a Money in the Bank winner say, I just want the WWE championship.
Yeah.
And cashing in, winning it was like, I don't know. That would be something different.
The way I could see it as well would be if person X wins Money in the Bank and they cash in, let's say after the SummerSlam main event, right? And they grab both titles, they celebrate, they run off, and then next week on Raw we see Paul Heyman like going through the contract terms and like pulling up like, no, it was only for one of the championships, and sort of legal weaseling his way into Roman Reigns keeping one of them. I could see that sort of thing, and then, moving into the Drew feud and the longest reigning champion kind of thing that he's doing at the moment, but possible.
Yeah, entirely possible, but more likely that it would just be a situation where if the cash-in happens and it's successful, they take both titles.
I think that is it.
Yeah, unless they decide to, keep Roman off of one show and just, pull off one of the titles and just make it the championship of that show again. Or bring back certain other titles that people want.
Yeah, there's just so many question marks around that. Like, Roman Reigns as the one champion leading both can fully be sustained. It can keep running. There's nothing stopping it from being, the thing. But there is a point where, we already think Roman Reigns is going for a really long title run here. Quite possibly breaking records. Obviously not the 4 or 5 year records. We got people saying all the way through to the next year's WrestleMania where he defends against The Rock. We got all this other stuff that people have thrown around, and I don't know if we want to hold up both world titles in that, or if we want to, release one into the wild.
Yeah, that is definitely a big question mark, because it is a situation where I do think they do want to maybe have Roman become the longest reigning singles champion in the modern era. It would have to beat about 850 days from Walter.
Could be a while.
So it's very, very possible that they may have him hold it until next year. At which point, I think would have to be Cody that would take the title. I don't really know, though. It's just, there are lots of questions, and I like that, because when we were at the end of before the unification of the world titles, we were like, who's next after this for SmackDown?
Yeah.
Now that Roman can go to Raw, he's got a whole list of new people that he can face and have a world championship match with, beginning with people like Randy Orton, and you could have random matches against guys like Seth Rollins, The Miz, Bobby Lashley, who's getting extremely popular, by the way, as a face.
Yeah, it's working really well for him.
So there are still options, and I like that. But at some point, it is going to become a situation where he's beaten everybody who can beat him.
Yeah, and I just don't know where they're gonna end up, or when that's gonna end up. Right, like it could be a really long time before we're getting there to truly figure out what we're actually gonna do. If it is next year's WrestleMania, right, like that's another 365 days. Roman Reigns is already at 626 days as of time of recording. But yeah, I don't know, my brain can't get rid of the fact that he does carry around both championships. They haven't been merged necessarily in that way. I think when you go to the Superstars page, when you go to the Superstars page on WWE.com, I know it's not very canon, it does just list them as both champions. In terms of how they talk about both championships on, again, the website, it's just listing Roman Reigns as both champions. I do feel like we are going to have to split them off sooner or later, whether that's Cody, whether that's somebody else. It could work really well for Cody to run away with the WWE Championship and continue that Universal Championship reign to get up and to meet Walter. I'm going to quickly Google how long Walter's title reign was before we run out of time. I'm Googling. I'm going as fast as I can. Walter was 870 days. And so if we're at 626 minus 626, that's another 244 days. 244 days from now. Come on, Google, don't fail me now. Middle of January next year, Roman would have to hold the Universal title.
Which is actually believable.
Yeah?
You could definitely see him maybe holding it to the Royal Rumble next year and losing the title because of an interference by or distraction or something by The Rock. That's completely believable.
Yeah. January is not that far away, but after all of that fact-finding mission, we are fully out of time now. It's been great talking to you.
Maybe.
You can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our Twitter page, twitter.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our YouTube page, youtube.com/WrestlingRNDup, and we will see you next week.